All right. I absolutely love this image. To start off lesson 4, we're talking about immigration, urbanization, and the rise of the American labor unions. We're also going to be talking about some labor strikes. This is the chaos of the American urban center and city at the turn of the century. You got all kinds of stuff happening here. Large wave immigration, a lot of free enterprise and business, a clash of different technologies. You got streetcars, horse and buggies, automobiles. All that's happening in Chicago at the crossroads of Dearborn and Randolph Streets in the early 1900s at the turn of the century. Pretty cool. So the American growth and expansion in this industrial age, we've got a lot of economic opportunity, large-scale industrialization. We're number one at the turn of the century as an industrial producer. Massive changes in technological growth and advancements. Large wave immigration coming over from Eastern Europe, Central Europe, China, Japan. Also migration from Mexico in the early 1900s, late 1800s. And this leads to large-scale population growth and large-scale urbanization. What we would call sort of the first wave of immigration was prior to the Gilded Age, pre-Civil War, and all the way back into the new nation in the colonial period. A lot of folks from Germany, Great Britain, Ireland, Norway, Sweden. So obviously the largest of all those groups would be what group? What group is massive for the colonial period? What language are we speaking? English, thank you. Great Britain, right? And then Irish, Scots-Irish, German, Norwegian, Sweden. And obviously they want to achieve the American dream, opportunity to own land, get jobs, practice religion freely, all that kind of stuff. But then in the post-Civil War era, all the way through World War I, we're going to see a new wave of immigration, Italian, Greek, Polish, Russian, present-day Hungary and Yugoslavia, a lot of Slavic folks coming over. We also have Chinese and Japanese immigration in this era, Latin American immigration, mostly Mexican immigration at the turn of the 19th to 20th century. But just like the immigrants then, or the immigrants from the colonial era, the immigrants from the new nation era, the immigrants at the turn of this century, and even immigrants today, what do they want? They want the American dream. They want more for their families. They want more for their children, right? Like, I want the best for you all. I want the best for my own girls. Like, I want to see you guys be able to live the American dream. That's why people come here. Warren, what were you going to say, buddy?
Oh, never mind.
Oh, okay, cool. Anybody have any questions there? So where are these folks being processed? Ellis Island, right? This is kind of a crazy statistic. Like over 12 million immigrants come through Ellis Island and are processed there in like a 20-year period. Like 85% of immigration is processed in Ellis Island. How many people can trace their family back through Ellis Island? Okay, cool. Cool. All right. How many people have been to Ellis Island? Awesome. You guys enjoy the trip? Pretty cool. I recommend everybody take an opportunity to go up there and visit. So the huddled masses. A lot of folks are coming over to work on farms, the Chinese on the transcontinental railroads, the textile industries in New York, pretty much all different types of folks, Italians, Slavs, Poles, Russians. A lot of Slavs, Italians, and Poles are going to end up working in the coal mines in western Pennsylvania, down into in the steel mills in western Pennsylvania, and the coal mines in West Virginia. Obviously, low pay, very dangerous working conditions, but they were willing to roll the dice because they knew that they had more opportunity, and they had an opportunity to do what they probably didn't in their home country. Own what? Land, right? Property ownership. So the first thing most of the immigrants see when they arrive is a gift to the United States from France, the Statue of Liberty, that was erected on Bedloe Island, and they are going to be processed at Ellis Island. And Asian immigrants coming into San Francisco are going to be processed at Angel Island during this era. And it was a really strict process, right? They had to go through medical tests. They want to find out what their politics are, what their intent is. It was not like you just walked through the door and it was like, hey, congratulations, you're a citizen. But the pathway to citizenship for these immigrants was pretty quick. Most of these folks could gain citizenship within just 3 to 5 years. Some as early as 1 to 2. Yeah. All right, so that's pretty cool. We're going to actually check out a thing about that today. So they brought it. So the guy that Gustav Eiffel, the Eiffel Tower guy, he's the guy that designed it. And the whole premise of when it arrived was the centennial of the American-French alliance from the American Revolution. So we get this massive statue, but we get it in pieces. So we've got to put it together. And then all these cities want it. And nobody knows how they're going to afford to put it together and where it's going to go. And it turns out that God really pushes forth the construction, and its location is Pulitzer. The guy. So guys like Pulitzer and William Randolph Hearst, they were like newspaper competitors. They get the project rolling, and they're like in competition, but they want Statue of Liberty to be in New York. So Pulitzer and Hearst are part of that. Excuse me. Thank you. That's a bird's eye. Does that help? So we're going to check out a film on the actual construction of the statue. And it takes a massive labor force to get it built. There's Ellis Island. This is a beautiful shot of Angel Island. Asian immigrants had to go through the same process in Angel Island for being processed. This is a group of West Virginia coal miners in the Monongahela coal mines in 1906. That's a melting pot itself, right? There are people from all different backgrounds: Appalachia, Italy, Poland, Russia, Slavic countries. Has anybody ever spent any time in Pittsburgh? Pittsburgh's its own melting pot of different countries that immigrated over 100 years ago to that city to either work in steel or coal or in the industrial sector. So, the assimilation process, the melting pot. We in this room are a melting pot. We are from different places, right? We have different cultures that are all coming together to make one larger culture. Like we have our own culture in here. Have you ever thought about that? Do you think about like the difference in cultures in a classroom? Like I have a classroom culture that I like to I want us to feel. How do I want you guys to feel when you walk in the room? I want you to feel welcome, but you know what I also want you guys to come in here? I want you to feel like you want to be here. I also want this to feel like a collegiate environment, right? Because you are in a college class. Therefore, when you come in the door, I want you to have that freedom. I want you to have freedom, So we have our own classroom culture. So we can connect culture to all segments of society. And what's kind of cool in our country is that we have all these blended cultures that really makes Americana what it is. So a lot of these folks coming in, they're going to settle in ethnic neighborhoods, whether it be New York or Baltimore or Boston or Chicago or Pittsburgh. They want to work hard to learn English. They want to work hard to get an education. They want to make sure their kids get educated. They want to make sure they get jobs. Does this sound familiar? This is every immigrant group that comes to America. And that's why in today's era, we can run some pretty clear parallels to all these other waves of immigration that come into our country. So the process of assimilating immigrants into American society is not an easy one, because it does include hostility and prejudice and racism and immigration restriction and political infighting over immigrants coming in. In fact, some of the earliest immigration restriction occurred because of prejudices and because of fear of tyranny. All right, so the first one would be the Chinese Exclusion Act. What other immigrant group pushed for that act? The Irish. Good. One we have not talked about yet is the Immigration Act of 1903 that was known as the Anarchist Exclusion Act. What's an anarchist? Yeah, they don't believe in government. So, any idea where our anarchists came from? It's kind of a trick question. Yeah, they're all over the place, right? We have a lot of immigrants coming in that did have anarchist sentiment, but we already had people living in America with anarchist sentiment. So it wasn't limited to just one country. Like you had Italian anarchists, you had Russian anarchists, you had Slavic anarchists, but the one group that gets pegged in the 1903 law is this little guy. Who's he representing? Irish, good. Well done. He is Irish.
Is it the Celt?
Okay. Well, there's a couple of things. He's wearing pants, but he's got his sash on. He's got his Irish flag. He's got his dagger. There were militant Irish labor groups, and there were also anarchist Irish groups, because Ireland was under the control of what country?
Great Britain.
Yeah, England, Great Britain, right? So a lot of folks come over and they are affiliated with gangs. They're against any style of government. But the majority of Irish coming over, they weren't anarchists. The majority of Irish were coming over, were not in gangs. They were looking to live the American dream. So this is anti-Irish sentiment, depicting this little guy as an anarchist, while Lady Liberty, Columbia, mixes up the melting pot. I really like that cartoon. Limits on immigration. Continued limits on immigration began in the post-World War I era. And the reason for this is because there's a fear after World War I in 1921 and in 1924 that what group is going to come to America? It's actually a political group, mostly Russian. Communists, very good. Communists are everywhere too. Russia, Italy, Germany, but mostly Russia. So in the post-World War I era, we have our first Red Scare under the leadership of A. Mitchell Palmer. So that leads to the Immigration Restriction Act of 1921, which was a 3% quota act, meaning that only 3% of vetted immigrants from a country, 3% of their population, could immigrate to America in a given year, right? And then it was, extended in 1924. What group truly suffers from immigration restriction from 1933 to 1940?
The Irish.
Nope.
Is it the Scots?
1933 to 1940. I'm looking for a particular religious group. Jewish, European Jews. Okay? German and European Jews are going to be turned away as a result of immigration restriction. It's going to be they're going to wind up right back in the hands of Nazi Germany and back to the Holocaust. This is one of the more controversial issues of immigration restriction in the post-World War I, pre-World War II era. This is a pretty racist cartoon, but it was meant to be racist on purpose. This guy is Frank Beard. He is kind of like a Thomas Nast. He wants to expose, he's like kind of a whistleblower. He wants to expose problems. And so here's what we got going on. Yeah.
Is that the dude on the second?
No, that's Uncle Sam. Yeah. So we've got Uncle Sam at the gates of the United States of America. Entrance free. Walk in. Welcome. In the back, we've got the Capitol with a golden dome on top. And then we have our immigrant who's got ragged shoes. He's got a bag full of poverty and a suitcase full of disease and a bone of superstition around his neck and possibly a yarmulke on his head. And he's got Sabbath desecration, possibly a barrel of wine or whiskey or liquor. He's got a bomb of anarchy on his back. So there's a lot of symbolism here. This particular cartoon is related to the Immigration Restriction Act. So let's take a look at the growth of the urban centers. Cities like Chicago grow for meatpacking, McCormick Reaper production, and a number of other mechanized production in that city. Detroit becomes the motor city for automobile production. We'll talk more about Ford and the assembly line. Obviously, Henry Ford and the Ford Motor Company were not the only people in the automobile industry. He just took a lot of people out of the automobile industry. Cleveland for oil, Pittsburgh for steel, New York for textiles, and a little bit of everything. So manufacturing obviously is rapidly growing. People are moving into large cities. Urbanization grows. Harsh conditions. People are crowded into really tight tenements and slums. They were called dumbbell tenements. They had very little airflow. We're actually going to see what dumbbell tenements look like. There's a guy by the name of Jacob Reese. He's a muckraker. He's a whistleblower. He takes pictures of how these people are living in the dumbbell tenements on the Lower East Side of Manhattan. Rapid city growth leads to new services, so public housing, large-scale sewage operations, water systems, public transportation. Boston and New York begin the first construction of subway systems. The first trolley and streetcar lines were built in Richmond, Virginia. This is kind of wild. This is Pittsburgh in 1902, and over 100 years later, Pittsburgh doesn't look a whole lot different. Early New York subway system. How many people have been on the metro? A bunch of us. Have you ever traveled like on the Lower East Side and the Lower West Side where you're like the old mosaic? They still got the old mosaics of the old school subway mosaics. Those are really cool. It's like just blows my mind that they've held up. Yeah.
When I was in New York and I went to NYU, like they had New York University.
Nice. That's really cool. This is the Richmond. This is the early Richmond trolley line, 1888. And I'm pretty pumped. You guys are actually going to get to check out one of the old trolley cars at the Virginia Historical Society. East Broad Street to Libby Hill and Chimborazo Park. We're going to check out Chimborazo Park if we have time. Have you ever noticed in parts of Richmond you can still see the old trolley lines in the middle of the street? These are the New York Roughnecks. That job was no joke. Right?
Oh my God.
Building skyscrapers, unreal.
You just sit there like it's no big deal.
That's it.
One right move and just like you're not dead. Just fly.
Pretty crazy. All right. So American cities are booming. The American population doubled, and the population in cities tripled in a 30-year period. Cities are growing up and out because of steel, skyscrapers. Guys, architects like Louis Sullivan are going to be perfecting the skyscraper, first appearing in Chicago and then making their way to New York. People are going to get around through metropolitan transportation, subway systems, trolley systems. Chicago hosted the World's Fair in 1893. I highly recommend you check out Devil in the White City. Did you talk about that? Is it? Yeah. So, really great book by Eric Larson. So, The Devil in the White City tracks the group of people that are building the World's Fair, but Larson also follows H.H. Holmes, a serial killer that takes advantage of all the people coming to Chicago during the World's Fair. It's a pretty wild book. It's pretty good. It's about maybe 10 years old, maybe a little bit older. Electricity, indoor plumbing, telephones make city life more alluring. Department stores, Macy's in New York, Marshall Field's in Chicago, provided urban working class jobs, and it attracted urban middle class shoppers. This is a census map that shows you like the higher density, like the rust color. That just shows you that's where the most significant population growth was in 1900.
California really booming.
Yep, but look at New York, Boston, Pittsburgh, Cleveland, Chicago. That is a bird's eye view of the world's Columbia Exposition, the Chicago's World's Fair in 1893. And it might be kind of tough to see, but the planners of the World's Fair, they had to try to one-up the guy that was sort of the highlight of the French World's Fair, the previous World's Fair, Eiffel, and Eiffel's Tower. So this is what they attempted to do. You see what's in the background there? Yes, the Ferris wheel. Good job. It's the beginning of the Ferris wheel.
Looks like a really big
Yeah. But the Ferris wheel was so big that like each car on the Ferris wheel was like as big as this room. Yeah, it's crazy. In fact, it would maybe have been just a tiny bit smaller, but the guy that made the cars to get on was George Pullman, the Pullman Palace car guy. He built the cars for the Ferris wheel.
But didn't he also have the stripe?
The next year, 1894.
These
Yeah.
was bringing out.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. So this is a good place for us to pump the brakes.